Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really getting into the global oil market. We want to understand where things stand now and, what the future might actually hold.
Right. And we're drawing from a pretty recent market outlook, looking at regional growth, too. Lots of data in there.
Yeah, exactly. So our mission today really is to pull out the key takeaways, the important stuff, give you a shortcut to understanding where this vital global market is headed. We'll go region by region.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Maybe start with the really big picture numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. So globally, the market was worth, let's see, $263 billion roughly back in 2021.
Over 2 trillion. Wow.
Yeah. And it's projected to climb, reaching about $2,460 billion by 2025. And then quite a jump, over $380 billion by 2033.
Go.
That works out to a compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, of about 3.3% over that whole period. And, what's really important, despite all the talk about energy transition and sustainability, this source makes it very clear. Oil is still, critical and absolutely essential for global energy, for industry, for the foreseeable future.
That is a pretty significant overall expansion then, isn't it? Really suggests oil isn't disappearing overnight.
No, according to these numbers, no.
But you said it gets really interesting when you break it down geographically. That's where the shifts really show up.
Exactly. That's where you see the dynamics. Asia Pacific, for instance, it really stands out. It's the largest contributor.
Okay.
So its market revenue was already huge, over $865 billion in 2021. That's projected to hit nearly $987 billion by 2025, and then surge past $1.3 trillion by 2033.
Wow, $1.3 trillion just for APAC.
Yeah, and growing faster than the global average, too, at about 3.7% CAGR.
And within Asia Pacific, who are the main players there?
Well, looking out to 2033, China is massive, expected to be around $384 billion. Japan's also significant, about $251 billion.
Right.
But the really interesting story within APAC, I think, is India. Ah, okay. What's happening there?
India shows really strong growth momentum. It's got the highest CAGR in the region, 4.4%. It's projected to reach over $204 billion by 2033.
4.4%. That's noticeably higher.
It is. And what's fascinating is seeing how India's growth, things like its economic expansion, urbanization, industrial output, it's really fueling that demand, outpacing even the regional average.
India's trajectory is definitely one to keep an eye on then. Okay, so let's shift gears. North America, how does it fit into this picture given its, established economic size?
Right. North America, still a major player, absolutely. Projections show it going from about $625 billion in 2021 up to nearly $878 billion by 2033.
Okay, still substantial growth.
It is, though the growth rate is a bit slower, reflecting about 2.7% CAGR.
And the U.S. is the dominant force there, I assume.
Oh, definitely. The U.S. is projected at nearly $700 billion of that 2033 total. But Canada and Mexico are significant, too, around $104 billion and $74 billion respectively by then. So steady growth reflecting sort of continued demand in a mature market.
Pretty much, established industrial base, consumer economy still heavily reliant on oil for transport, products, all that.
Makes sense. Okay, let's hop across the Atlantic. Europe. This is a continent we often hear about leading the charge on energy transitions.
Yeah.
How do the numbers look there?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Europe's forecast shows growth from about $404 billion in 2021 to roughly $563 billion by 2033. So a KDR of about 2.6%.
Slightly lower than North America, then.
Just slightly, yeah. And the big economies, Germany, France, the UK, they're major contributors. We're talking $81 billion for Germany, $80 billion for France, $62 billion for the UK by 2033.
Okay.
But here's a little wrinkle. The rest of Europe segment, so countries outside those big ones,
Yeah.
that segment actually shows stronger growth momentum. Its CAGR is projected at over 4%, hitting almost $150 billion by 2033.
Oh, that is interesting. Why the higher growth there in the sort of smaller economies? Any ideas from the source?
Well, it raises that question, doesn't it? The source suggests it could be ongoing industrial development in those areas, or maybe specific national policies where oil is still seen as, necessary for economic growth, even while the larger players push harder on renewables, perhaps.
That's a really compelling nuance. Shows things aren't uniform even within Europe. Okay, let's pivot now to some of the regions showing particularly strong growth rates. South America, you mentioned.
Yes, South America is definitely showing healthy growth. Total revenues there are expected to climb quite a bit, from around $145 billion in 2021
Okay.
up to over $232 billion by 2033. That's a CAGR of about 4.15%. Pretty robust.
Core 0.15. Yeah, that's picking up pace. Who's leading there?
Brazil is the largest contributor by far, projected at over $70 billion by 2033. Then you have Argentina, around $32 billion, Colombia, about $19 billion. It seems tied to, general economic expansion, infrastructure build-out, just rising energy demand as those economies develop.
Right, right. Okay, now, the Middle East, historically, synonymous with oil. What's the outlook saying for their market? Are they growing like these other regions?
It's different for the Middle East. The growth trajectory there is more modest.
Okay.
It's projected to go from about $78 billion in 2021 to just under $99 billion by 2033. That's a AGR of only about 1.8%.
Oh, significantly lower.
Yeah. Saudi Arabia is still the leader, around $32 billion projected for 2033. The UAE shows actually more rapid growth within the region, hitting over $10 billion.
So if we connect that to the bigger picture, what does that lower growth rate tell us?
Well, I think it's quite telling, as you say. It suggests that while the Middle East remains obviously a primary supplier globally.
The source of the oil, yeah.
Exactly. The biggest demand growth where consumption is really increasing, that's happening elsewhere now. In Asia, South America, and Africa, as we'll see. It changes the market dynamics for the producing region itself.
Fascinating. Okay, so you've mentioned these regional dynamics, these shifts. Where are the real hotspots then? Where's the most sort of explosive growth expected?
Well, according to this source, the standout, the fastest growing region globally is Africa.
Africa, really?
Yeah, it's projected to basically double its oil market revenue, expanding from about $45 billion in 2021 to over $92 billion by 2033. That's a CAGR of, wait for it, 6.75%.
6.75%. That's huge compared to the others.
It really is remarkable. Now, specific countries like Nigeria are projected at about $16 billion, South Africa at $28 billion by 2033, but the most stunning part,
Go on.
the rest of Africa segment. So beyond those specific countries listed, that part is projected to surge to nearly $50 billion by 2033. Its CAGR is the highest in the entire data set, over 7%.
Wow, 7.1%. So what's driving that? What's fueling that kind of growth across such a diverse continent?
Yeah, it really makes you ask that question, right? The report points towards a combination of factors. Things like rapid population growth, accelerating urbanization, big infrastructure projects happening, increasing industrialization. It's all driving this huge surge in energy demand. It really positions Africa as, well, a key new frontier for oil consumption and investment.
That is genuinely remarkable. Seeing that kind of dynamism, it really highlights a major shift. So if we were to summarize the key contrast here from the source, it's not just that the market's growing, but where it's growing is changing profoundly.
That's it, exactly. The source concludes pretty clearly. Yeah, mature markets, North America, Europe, they're still growing steadily, but maybe more slowly. But it's the emerging regions, especially Africa, South America, parts of Asia, that are really becoming the main engines of growth now, the focal points for investment, for development in the oil sector.
Right.
And it just reinforces that core message. Oil isn't going away quickly. It's still essential for industry, transport, energy globally, at least in the near to medium term. But the demand centers, they are definitely shifting.
What a deep dive that was. Okay, so the core insight seems crystal clear. The global oil market, still growing. But the centers of that growth are moving, shifting dramatically, and there's surprising dynamism in places maybe we didn't expect, like particularly Africa and parts of Asia.
Precisely. And maybe, for you listening, here's something to chew on, a final thought. Given these really strong growth projections, especially in emerging markets like Africa, what does that actually mean long-term for the pace, the nature of the global energy transition?
Good question.
If demand is climbing so sharply in these regions, what kind of new opportunities or, challenges does that create for the world's energy landscape? How might that reshape international energy policy, investment decisions? It's worth considering how these shifts might impact your own understanding of where global energy is heading. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're getting into the global oil markets.
A huge topic.
Absolutely. It's so much more than just fuel prices, isn't it? It's global economics, geopolitics, our energy future, all tied up together.
It really is.
I'm keen to unpack this, as I know you are too. Okay, let's unpack this.
Definitely. It's such a critical area, and the material from cognitive market research really helps shed light on the dynamics.
So what's our mission today?
Essentially, to understand the key drivers pushing the market, the big restraints holding it back, and maybe most interestingly, the new trends shaping its future.
Great. Let's start with those drivers then. What keeps things moving? The demand seems relentless.
It really is. Despite the push for renewables, global demand for crude is still, well, a major factor.
Especially industrial and transportation, right?
Exactly. Think about growing cities, manufacturing scaling up.
And just more vehicles everywhere.
Precisely. Crude oil still fundamental for electricity in some places, global shipping, aviation. It's baked in.
So how are producers reacting?
What's fascinating here is the investment. National oil companies, private firms, they're pouring money into exploration and production.
Where are they looking?
They're going after shale, deep water fields, even oil sands. Basically, the tougher, more complex sources to secure that long-term supply.
And the geopolitical angle, it always seems huge in oil.
Oh, profoundly so. Look, a decision from OPEC plus or even just a rumor about sanctions. It can cause prices to jump or fall several dollars almost instantly. It just shows oil's raw power in, global economics and diplomacy.
That demand picture is strong, but it can't be smooth sailing. What are the main restraints?
Well, one of the biggest headaches is definitely the price volatility.
Right. It seems to swing wildly sometimes.
It does. It's incredibly sensitive to geopolitical events, supply-demand getting out of whack, currency changes.
Yeah, and that must make planning difficult.
Hugely. It disrupts investment plans, messes with government budgets, creates uncertainty for industries that rely on stable energy costs.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Then you see the growing impact of environmental rules and the whole decarbonization push.
carbon pricing, emissions targets.
Exactly. Climate commitments from governments are actively discouraging fossil fuel reliance. Plus, there are just the sheer operational hurdles.
Like what?
Getting oil out, especially offshore or from unconventional sources, takes massive capital. We're talking billions up front.
Billions, wow.
Yeah, and years of development. Imagine starting a project like that costing billions, and then the oil price tanks.
It becomes a massive gamble.
A very high-stakes one.
Okay, so we have demand pulling one way, restraints pushing back, but the market's still evolving, right? What trends are emerging?
All right, it's not static at all. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
You see major oil companies, the big names, actively diversifying. They're moving into renewables.
Solar, wind.
Solar, wind, hydrogen, even carbon capture technologies.
Yeah.
It's partly about aligning with ESG goals, environmental, social governance factors.
That's a big shift.
It is. And within their traditional operations, technology is making waves. Digitalization, automation.
How does that work in an oil field?
Think AI.
Mm.
The Internet of Things, IoT, predictive analytics. They're using these to optimize drilling, manage reservoirs better, cut down on environmental impact.
It's like sensors feeding data.
Exactly. Sensors gather data, AI analyzes it to maybe predict the best spot to drill next, making things way more efficient, less wasteful.
Interesting.
And this also raises an important question about trade flows. You've got new players becoming major exporters.
Like the U.S.
The U.S., Brazil has really surged, Guyana too. They're reshaping the global supply map.
And where's the demand heading?
Increasingly, Asia-Pacific. It's becoming the biggest demand center, so investment strategies are shifting to focus there.
So what does this all mean for you listening in?
Right.
It seems the global oil market is this incredibly complex, dynamic system. You've got that persistent demand, the tough geopolitical realities, growing environmental pressures.
And now major technological and strategic shifts happening almost in real time.
That really keeps you on your toes.
It absolutely does. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Think about that balancing act
Between what?
between energy security, keeping the lights on, keeping economies running, and meeting those global climate goals. How that balance plays out, it's going to keep redefining international trade, economic power.
Like a global chess game.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Played out over decades.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, what are the next big shifts going to be in this critical market?